Welcome to the EPG Pathshala course in linguistics. I'm Probal Das Gupta. I'm with the Indian Statistical Institute, Calcutta. This particular paper, which I'm responsible for, is called Morphology and Syntax, within which we're about to cover the module called Preliminary Syntactic Concepts. The objective of this module is to begin the transition from morphology into syntax and to show you some basic concepts of syntax in relation to morphology. From the following lesson onwards, we will move entirely into syntax, but in this lesson there is still some hangover from morphology. When we look at words combining with other words to form phrases and sentences, we immediately find there is no such thing as words combining with words. You get a noun combining with an adjective, you get a pronoun combining with a verb, you get a preposition combining with a noun, etc. Words are never simply words. They come with their labels attached. They belong to what are called parts of speech. When you were children, you must have learnt at school some of these words and maybe even their Indian language equivalents: noun, adjective, verb, preposition, conjunction, interjection, pronoun, adverb, and all that. One important thing at this stage is to revive your memory of what all these words mean, because many of us are rather vague about them. We tend to forget what we learnt as children. If you want to do any syntax at all, you will have to revive what little you remember of all this. So to help you to brush up, we have given you an exercise, very simple. We show you some English words and we ask you to identify their parts of speech, which is an adjective, which is an adverb, which is a pronoun, that kind of stuff. You decide what to say. We just give you the words. After that, we want you to think about the fact that there are really two kinds of words. I don't mean two parts of speech, I mean two kinds of words, two kinds of work that words do. Some words convey full-blooded meaning, what is called content. Words like room, house, run, swim, dance, laugh, cry, boy, girl, tall, short, all these words. These are called content words. They're often called contentives for short. Contentive means content word. The other kind, words that don't convey meaning from the external world but are about managing the household of the language. They are called function words or functors. Examples of functors are the, an, be, have, and, or, because, therefore, things like that. They connect different parts of the sentence with each other in various ways. They don't always connect. They sometimes indicate a reference to something else. They do that kind of work, but they are not content words. They are not words of the same general species as laugh and cry and boy and girl and tall and short. They are language, but they're doing a different kind of job. They're doing functional work. Sometimes the work done by a functor is identical to what is done by some inflection. For example, the president's friends, president apostrophe S friends, where the connection between friend and president is being made by the apostrophe S inflection, the genitive case marking on the word president. Compare this with the friends of the president. Here the same connection is made not by a genitive ending, but by the preposition of. The friends of the president has the same meaning as the president's friends. Of corresponds to apostrophe S. So the inflection apostrophe S and the functor of are doing similar work. Remember that we've been saying inflections are the concern of syntax. Just as syntax is concerned with inflections such as apostrophe s, syntax is also concerned with functors like of. In fact, describing what functors do is a large part of the work of syntax. You can begin by imagining that syntax has the job of describing the work of the functors. With that understanding in place, you now need to look more carefully at what the inflectional features are doing. We have just given you an example of what they do by saying that in the president's friends, the apostrophe s inflection connects friends to president. In general, inflections do connecting work, but connecting is a very vague term. We will build up your understanding of these things slowly. We begin by saying that all the connecting work of various kinds happens in a construction. What is a construction? A construction is the result of a couple of words that are connected by some syntactic device. Sometimes the syntactic device is a matter of inflection. For example, in the president's friends, the inflection apostrophe s connects friends to president. The result is you've got the construction, the president's friends. Friends is said to be the head of the construction. The president's is said to be the dependent. Now you will scratch your head. How can I say in a phrase like the president's friends that friends is the head and the president is the dependent? Surely the president is the most important person in the country. How can you call the president a dependent? Chichi. You need to understand that in syntax, when we use a word like head, it's a technical term of grammar. In the phrase, the president's friends, the word friends is called the head, which corresponds to the fact that instead of saying, I have seen the friends, I can say, I have seen the president's friends. In other words, the friends and the president's friends are interchangeable. So friends is that part of the phrase, the president's friends, which is interchangeable with the whole. Instead of saying, I have seen the president's friends, I cannot say, I have seen the president's, president apostrophe s. I can say I've seen the president, but I cannot say I have seen the president's with this apostrophe s, the way I can have friends without president. Now, you are a critical listener, you will naturally shoot up and say, I'm making a mistake when I claim that I cannot say, I have seen the president apostrophe s. I'm simply mistaken. Of course, it is possible in English to say, I have seen the presidents. You need the right context. The context would have to be, I've seen your friends, I've seen my friends, but I haven't seen the president's. Meaning, I haven't seen the president's friends with the word friends left out and understood. Indeed, in that kind of context, I quite agree with you. It is possible to say, I have not seen the presidents, or I have seen the presidents. But in that kind of context, there is no doubt at all that friends is understood in the sentence. So even though I cannot hear the word friends, even though the phonemes of the word friends are not present, the word friends is present in spirit in that sentence. In contrast, if I say I have seen the friends, when I say I have seen the friends, there is absolutely no reason to imagine that presidents is understood, or John's is understood, or Mary's is understood. When I say I have seen the friends, I'm not commenting on whose friends I'm talking about. The genitive is not understood when I say friends. But when I say the president plus genitive ending, the word after the genitive ending is indeed syntactically present, which is what we mean by saying it is understood. That is the difference. That is why friends is the head and presidents is the dependent and not the head. Because the head can be substituted for the whole thing without reservation. In an unqualified, absolute way, it can be substituted. It is that part of the construction that has the same distribution as the construction as a whole. It's called the head. The part which is not the head is called the dependent. Typically, there is an inflectional connection between the head and the dependent, but not necessarily. Syntax is not all inflection. Anyway, all this was to tell you about what a construction is. Syntax describes construction. Syntax also describes word order. Word order has to be considered separately from everything I've said so far. English places adjectives before nouns. You get the intelligent children. French, on the whole, puts adjectives after nouns. So the intelligent children comes out in French as les enfants intelligents. The children intelligent. Les enfants intelligents. That's another area of difference between languages that can only be called syntactic difference, not morphological. The methods of describing syntactic facts come from three sources. We have already reminded you that quite a bit of syntactic description was enabled in traditional grammar that you've been taught at school. That is one place where we get all these words, noun, pronoun, adjective, and so on. We don't plan to throw it away. It comes from the Greco-Roman tradition of knowledge. A second source is structuralism or structural linguistics, from which we have derived a lot of our current understanding. Structural linguistics grew through a debate against traditional grammar, and in the first few modules of the syntax part of this course, we will show you little bits of the debate and take you into the structural approach, which is inherited in current work. Finally, the main source of current work is a way of doing syntactic research called generative grammar, sometimes more specifically called generative syntax. Generative grammar is the third of the three sources from which we take our tools for describing. While we go through all the phenomena to be described in syntactic work over the next 20 modules, you will be noticing that syntax is one more place where the debate between IA and IP goes on. The debate between the item and arrangement approach and the item and process approach. You will find that in syntax, the task of IA methods is to build syntactic structures, and the task of IP methods is to modify what has been built, to change what has been built. There is a kind of conversation between these two ways of doing grammar. The conversation runs through all syntactic work. And as the conversation progresses, you will find the process part of the work takes over and the arrangement part fades into the background. By which we don't mean that everything to be said in syntax when the end of syntax arrives is going to be about process. There will be a place for arrangement ideas also. We just talked about word order. Obviously, there is an element of arrangement when we try to understand word order, when we try to understand the fact that English uses intelligent children and French uses enfants intelligents. However, very often arrangement is about a hasty first picture of what we can see. And when we step back and take a second look and draw a more careful picture, very often process ideas come in that were not immediately obvious. and very often arrangement fades into the background of approximate first descriptions. Even so, arrangement has a role to play. IA methods are not stupid. The people who built them were not stupid people. We need them, but they are not the last word. Let us now look at the way inflectional features work in the syntax. We have been looking at inflection in morphology. We will now begin to look at the work they do from a syntactic viewpoint. For this job, it is a simple matter to choose examples from Sanskrit. Any highly inflected language is a good place to look in order to understand what work inflection does in syntax. I'll show you 3 examples from Sanskrit. He throws a small stone, actually, comes out as Kshudram Prastaram Kshipati. Kshudra is small, Prastara is stone, and Kshipati is he throws. What did you notice here? Prastaram is an accusative word. It has accusative inflection on the word for stone. Kshudram, the adjective small, copies the accusative case from prastaram. That is what there is to notice, that there is a copying of a feature. Agreement. My second example is he fears this tiger, which in Sanskrit comes out as etasmad vyagrad vibheti. Vibheti, he fears. Vyagrad, tiger in the ablative case. Etasmad, this in the ablative case. So the word this, which is a demonstrative, copies the ablative case from the noun. Third and last example in this bunch. Prayataya matuh smarati. He remembers his late mother. Here again, you get copying of the genitive case from mother to late. Now in all these, you find 3 verbs choosing an accusative, an ablative, and a genitive on the noun. In my comments, I've been emphasizing the fact that inflection marks agreement between the noun and its dependence. The noun is a head, and the dependent may be an adjective like shudram or a demonstrative. Agreement also links the verb to the rest of its construction. We've shown you 3 Sanskrit verbs. Kshipati, throws, which takes an accusative object. Vibheti, fears, which takes an ablative complement. And smarati, remembers, which takes a genitive complement. By the way, we take this opportunity, while we have your ear, to point out that the word genitive is spelled G-E-N-I-T-I-V-E. We draw your attention to the spelling. We have seen in the course of our teaching that a lot of students incorrectly spell the word genitive G-E-N-E-T-I-V-E because they imagine that it is somehow connected to the word genetic, which is indeed spelled with N-E. Actually, genitive is not connected with the word genetic. It is a different word, and please remember to spell it G-E-N-I and not G-E-N-E. We'll be very grateful if you're able to remember this. When we talk about the connection between the verb in Sanskrit and the case that it takes as its accompaniment, we use the technical term govern. The verb kshipati for throw governs the accusative case. The verb vibheti, fear, governs the ablative, and the verb smarati, remember, governs the genitive. You compare this with English. English throw and fear and remember all take exactly the same kind of object. He threw them at me, he fears them, he remembers them. You don't say he remembers there, you say he remembers them. But in Sanskrit you say he remembers there. That is why Sanskrit is different from English. It works differently. So it's important to see that a verb can govern objects with various cases. This is called governing. We here speak of the head, which is the verb, having a syntactic linkage with its dependents, here the nouns, through this mechanism of government. What is the difference between a verbal head governing the case of its object and the noun head of those noun adjective constructions or noun demonstrative constructions having agreement between the noun and the dependent? There are these two syntactic linkages. Agreement as well as government are about inflectional features being controlled by a head. That is what they have in common. What is different about them is that when you have agreement, the head and the dependent show the same feature. Thus, when you take the example about remembering the dead mother, prayataya matuh smarati, both matuh and prayataya have the same genitive case. That is a result of agreement. Agreement copies a feature. Whereas in government, the head verb, which does not itself have a case at all, imposes a case on the dependent, which therefore gets to carry it, an ablative, a genitive, or an accusative. That is the main difference. When you look at this difference and begin to think about it critically, beyond what traditional grammar tells you, some people, in their reflective thinking, take an innovative direction. There are structural linguists who have proposed that we've got our thinking wrong about agreement and government, that we've drawn the boundary at the wrong place. They argue that indeed when there is subject-verb agreement, for number, for example, the man runs, the men run, that is indeed agreement because you get singular or plural chosen at the level of the subject and singular or plural chosen at the level of the verb. But, those people say, those structuralists have said, when you say that prayataya copies the feminine gender from matuh, and therefore there is agreement for gender between matuh, mother, and prayataya, dead, you are making a mistake. You are quite right to say that matuh is genitive and prayataya is genitive, and the genitive case is shared by the two on the basis of agreement, and that the genitive is copied from the head matuh to the dependent prayataya. But you are wrong to say gender is copied. Why? These linguists have said that matuh is feminine inherently. The word for mother has no choice but to be feminine. That word in the lexicon could not have chosen to be masculine or neuter. It has to be feminine. The adjective prayata, being an adjective, has a choice. You can say prayata masculine, prayata feminine, or prayatam neuter in the nominative singular. Adjectives have a choice of which gender to take, which number to take, which case to take. Nouns can choose their case and their number, but not their gender. A particular noun has exactly the gender that it has. It has no choice. Therefore, these innovative structural linguists have said, why not claim that the head noun matuh governs the gender of its adjective and imposes agreement on the adjective only for number and case, not for gender. So the argument goes, just as a verb governs the case of its object, likewise a noun governs the gender of its adjective or demonstrative dependent. but it controls agreement on the demonstrative and the adjective for number and for case. Why? Because the noun has a choice of number and a choice of case, and the same choice is imposed on the dependent. But the noun has no choice where gender is concerned. One important formal difference between agreement and government to which we want to draw your attention concerns the syntax. A Sanskrit verb governs the case of its object. In English, you never have a verb governing a genitive object. No, you don't have that. But English verbs often tell the dependent what functor to take. You get, he is interested in this tiger. You don't get, he is interested of this tiger. You get, he is tired of this subject. You don't get, he is tired in this subject. So, tired governs of. Interested governs in. There are linkages of this kind. It is possible to govern a preposition, to require your object or complement to take a particular preposition. Agreement never does this. You never find an agreement relation saying, there is an of here, please copy that of and use it twice. In other words, you never find somebody saying, instead of go to the brown house, you never find somebody saying, go to the to brown to house, which would involve to being attached to every single word because you want it to be repeated over the entire phrase. Nobody ever does that. No language ever does that. Instead of from the spectacular tiger, you never say from spectacular from tiger. Agreement never forces a functor to be repeated. A government sometimes imposes a functor. Agreement never imposes a functor. Agreement can impose an inflection, but it can never impose a functor. This is a very important difference between agreement and government. Now we go back to the notion of construction. The syntactic construction is set up by a head and dependent being related to each other through a syntactic linkage. The syntactic linkage may or may not use inflection. I'm not saying we have inflection everywhere. But when there is inflection, it certainly does this job among other jobs. Maybe there's a functor. Maybe there's nothing. Maybe there's something else. So when you look at interested in this tiger, since interested imposes the functor in, it creates a construction, interested in this tiger, where the head is interested and the dependent is in this tiger. Within in this tiger, there is a construction where in is the head and this tiger is the dependent. Within this tiger, tiger is the head and this is the dependent. So when you draw this as a tree, this and tiger go up like this, and in and this tiger go up like this, and interested in this tiger go up like this. You get branches coming down from the top. You have the top and then interested in this tiger, then in and this tiger, this and tiger. What I have just shown you is how to draw a tree diagram. Tree diagrams are used all over syntax. Learning syntax is in large part learning the art of drawing and understanding tree diagrams. If you look at these diagrams carefully, you will find that we are not just showing constructions. At the very bottom of the tree diagram, when you look at this and tiger, sure, this tiger is a construction, but this is not a construction. Tiger is not a construction. What are we showing? A syntactic tree diagram has nodes and has branches coming out of the nodes. A node is a little dot. From the dot, 2 or more branches come out. Normally, the branch leads you to yet another node from which other branches come out. But at the very end of the process, it leads you to a word or other element. And then it doesn't go on any further. There are no branches from the element. Those elements are called terminal elements. That's where it ends. One way to describe what is depicted in a tree diagram is to say, branches show you the constituents, which means the parts, of a constitute, which is called the whole. A whole consists of parts. A constitute consists of constituents. That is why very often these diagrams are called constituency diagrams. In other words, constituent-constitute relations are shown in these diagrams. Why are the constituents coming together? Because of a construction. How do you specify the construction? We label the nodes. At the node we write, this is a demonstrative. Tiger is a noun. This tiger is a noun phrase. In is a preposition. In this tiger is a prepositional phrase. Interested is an adjective. Interested in this tiger is an adjective phrase. How do we do this? The phrase is named after the head. This demonstrative, tiger, noun, noun, head, demonstrative, dependent, noun phrase, because it's the noun that is the head, not the demonstrative. In this tiger, in preposition, this tiger, noun phrase, prepositional phrase, because the preposition is the head. You go like this all the way up the tree. That is the logic of drawing a syntactic tree, and it is the basis of showing how the construction works. This is all that you need to know. From here on, it is best if we go back and summarize what the module has done. In this module, we tried to show you how exactly inflection straddles the boundary between morphology and syntax. In showing this, we specified carefully both what the morphology of inflection is doing and what the syntax is doing. And we showed you how inflection manages the syntactic linkages known as agreement and government in order to set up syntactic linkage between a head and its dependent in a construction. While doing this, we brought out some parallels between the work done by inflection when setting up these connections and the work done by functors. In this module, we explained how functors are one type of word and contentives are another type of word, and how this bifurcation of words into two types is different from the division of words into parts of speech like noun, verb, adjective, pronoun, and so on. On the basis of these ideas, we showed you the elementary principles of drawing tree diagrams to show how the syntactic constructions are put together in terms of constituents and constitutes. And we showed you what nodes are in the tree and how to label them in terms of the choice of heads. That is how far we've been able to come in this module. Thank you for your attention. Make sure that you keep reading the e-texts and following up their suggestions for further reading. See you next time.